In this video, we will start polishing our walk cycle. As for the run cycle, we will apply some kind of layered method, meaning that we will start by polishing the feet, then the root of the torso, and then the different features of the body. As explained in the previous video, we may have to change the timing of this animation. Basic walk cycle is generally around 1 second, maybe a little more. Since I'm animating at 30 frames per second, the current animation is about 0.8 seconds. To get a better feeling about this, I will select all my keys and I will switch to Bezier by pressing the T key. When I play the animation, it definitely feels a bit too fast. What I want to do is push the length of this animation a little over 30 frames. Let's try 32 frames. So I will set the end of the animation on frame 31. Now, with all my keys selected, I will put the playhead on frame 0 and press S to scale, till the latest keys are aligned with frame 32. This way, all the keys have been offset by 1 frame. I now have a key pause every 4 frames. My walk cycle rhythm looks way more natural. With my armature in pause mode, I will select the foot and I will press Ctrl Tab over the action editor to switch to the graph editor. I will then click the Show Selected Only icon. We will start by hiding all the curve but the location curves. Whether you're working on a run or a walk cycle, the first thing you want is to fix whenever the foot is in contact with the ground. Since the contacting foot is supposed to move at a constant speed, you need a linear interpolation between the first contacting frame and the last contacting frame. In our case, between frame 0 and frame 20. You can easily get to this result by converting the keyframes on those contacting poses to vector using the V key. And then we can get rid of all the keyframes in between. The same then apply to the Z and X key. Won't be any up and down or side to side motion while the foot is on the ground. Select the Z and X curve keys and I will press the dot key to zoom in. There should be no variation between frame 0 and frame 20, so I will simply duplicate frame 12, which is the same as frame 20, and move it by pressing G and X on the X-axis toward frame 20. Pressing the V key, I can transform the handles on frame 0 and frame 20 to vector and get rid of all the keys in between. And here we have fixed our curve whenever the foot is in contact with the ground. A little detail here. Since I have created this animation by duplicating our run cycle, we can see that we have a loop modifier or cycling modifier onto our curve, and they do repeat over time. If I select all the curve, I can press Shift E and use a clear cyclic modifier to get rid of it. But since we are working on a cycle, it does make sense to keep the modifier. So I will press Shift E and select Make Cyclic again. Before I start polishing the curve, I will calculate the motion path. Use the foot controller as a reference point, or you can choose the toe controllers. As explained before, I will press Q to calculate the motion path since I've made it one of my quick favorites. And I'm calculating it over frame 0 to 32. Before I jump into polishing, I've tracked the motion of the foot on the reference. In before, whenever the foot is contacting the ground, it's moving with a linear fashion. Then we can see an ease in and ease out whenever it's starting to raise. It's accelerating until the passing pause, but also losing altitude. And then it raises again, go a little beyond the contact pose and fall. For the run cycle, we will polish one foot and then we will mirror the animation onto the other one. To help myself, I will go in front view and press Alt B and frame half of the character, so that I see only the left foot, the one I'm going to work on. From there, let's start polishing the location of the foot. I will start with the Y location. As usual, I will display the polished curve as a reference. In studying the reference, we've seen that the foot was traveling a bit backward when leaving the ground, so I'm pushing a bit the curve on frame 22. As if it was some kind of overshoot. We get a smooth arc in the curve, and then an acceleration toward the next contacting pose. And as shown in the reference, the foot travels a bit further than the contacting pose before contacting on frame 32. So the value of the curve on frame 31 is lower, so further forward than on frame 32. I will go back in the 3D view, press Q to access my quick favorite and update the motion path. We now need to work on the up and down of the foot. As you can see, it's very linear for the time being. As seen in the reference, the highest point for the foot is going to be just after leaving the ground and just before hitting the ground. I'm raising the control point on frame 24 and then I will lower it next to the passing pose. I want the toes to almost touch the ground. I will move the previous extreme up from frame 24 to frame 23 to have a smoother motion. I will also move the next extreme on frame 30 so that the foot gets high and then slap onto the ground. And now we can see that we have a motion path that is very close to what we had on the reference. Note that the keys on the contacting frames all have their handles set to vector, so that we don't have any easing when the foot is leaving the ground or when it's contacting the ground. We can now switch to front view. Editing the left to right motion is going to be pretty straightforward. I will frame the curve and I will give it a little parabolic shape, making sure that the foot is at its extreme on the side whenever we are hitting the passing pose. We are starting to get a decent result regarding the location of this foot controller. Let's work on the foot roll. I prefer to start working on the rotation using the heel controller, because it's the main rotation controller of the foot, at least on the walk cycle. And then I will get back on the foot to tweak and input some subtle rotation to the foot. To touch the ground, the foot should be slapping. So I want a fast motion between the contacting pose and the flat foot position. So I will offset the key with a value of 0 on frame 1 and I will switch the handle to vector. This way the foot is getting flat on the ground over one frame with a clean curve. After the passing pose, when the heel is raising, I want a slight acceleration. So I want my curve to look more like a parabolic one. Also, I need to offset a bit the moment the heel starts to raise. It's just after the passing pose. Around frame 10, not frame 8. I will fix this a little later. Right now I'm just pushing the pose to make sure that the foot has a smoother motion. I want to hold a bit the pose where the foot is pointing down, so I will duplicate the key on frame 24 to frame 25 and create a slight plateau. Then I want to create the flapping or whipping motion, meaning that the toes will get higher just before they hit the ground. So I need to push the curve down just before the contacting pose. From there I will kind of fine-tune each pose. It's more about a motion feeling than something I can really explain. And I will fix the moment the heel raise by delaying it by 2 frames. Next we are going to work on the X rotation of the main toe controller. Going to have the same behavior as the tail of the squirrel character. It will have a subtle overlapping or follow-through motion. In this case, we will be only animating the exular rotation of the toes. It's very simple. We want the toes to slightly drag. So basically, you want them to point toward their previous position. As the foot flaps on the ground and is getting flat, I will slightly raise the toes. A frame later, I will make them flat and switch their handles to vector. Then working on the moment the foot leaves the ground, I will switch the handle on frame 20 to vector to make sure that the rotation of the toes is accelerating as they are pulled backward. Then I will make sure I have some dragging of the toes until frame 30, not bending them too much or the motion will be too stylized and the foot will look very loose. And as I have a hard time getting the right position for the toes on frame 30, I simply add another keyframe here and animate on once. Animating on once means that you add a keyframe or a drawing on each single frames. It's perfect when you have a complex motion on very few frames to key each frame and work each poses one by one. With our toes now polished, we can switch back to the foot and work a bit on its rotation. We will keep it simple and only work on the Z-quaternion rotation. Foot motion when going into details can be very complex. If you want to push the level of realism further, you need to study your reference frame by frame. Check out which part of the foot is contacting first, whether the weight is more on the edge, on the middle of the foot, on the ball of the foot, etc. Is there any squashing or slight shaking motion of the ankle? All those subtle movements brings what we call texture to the animation. It will make your animation look less CG and more subtle. So in the end, I'm just slightly pushing the rotation we have already input during the blocking. And I will just input a bit of rotation toward the inside when the foot is leaving the ground and toward the outside when the foot is getting to the next contact pose. This will translate the fact that there is more pressure under the big toe when the foot is leaving the ground, while we favorize weight over the outer edge of the foot when contacting. The subtle weight transfer from the outside of the foot to the inside of the foot between the contacting pose and the pushing pose. So we can translate this by inputting a bit of rotation when the foot is leaving the ground toward the inside. This is not a golden rule because it will vary from people to people, based on your weight, the size of your hips, the orientation of your knees. Even a subtle foot rotation will bring personality to your character. Before we mirror the animation, we need to slightly rework the knee. So basically, we just need to rework the left to right motion of the pole target. I will just input a bit of delay based on the rotation of the foot. Most of the time, your foot and your knee are aligned. So when the toe is pointing inward, I will push the knee a bit inward. And when the toe is pointing on the outside, guess what? I will push a bit the pole target on the outside. The X and Y curve don't have that much influence. I prefer to remove any keyframes that are not set to 0. Once my keys were more or less defined, I've moved them away one from the other to get a smoother and slower motion. Do this to avoid any noisy motion of the knee. There can be a bit of noise on the knee motion during the impact. Especially on a heavy character, you will use the knee tweaker and input a bit of up and down motion whenever the feet are contacting the ground. But since our character is pretty lightweight, I prefer to keep a smooth motion of the knee following the foot. With the whole leg finally polished, we can now mirror the motion onto the other leg. This is something we have already done several times in this course, so I guess you know how to do it, but I will repeat the process. I first selected all the controller of the left leg. Press Alt-H to reveal all the curves and press A to select them all, then press Ctrl-C to copy those curves. Then I will select all the controller of the opposite leg. I will also press Alt-H to make sure that there is no curve hidden. I will select all the keys but the one on frame 0 and delete them. Then I will select all the keys and press Ctrl-Shift-V. Now, both my legs are moving the same way. I will press Shift-D to duplicate, X and 32 to offset by 32 frame. Way I have 2 cycles for the right leg and now I can offset it back by half the length of the motion by pressing G, X and -16. Have an alternate motion of both legs. I will go on frame 0 and insert a keyframe on all the channels, then select those keyframes, press V and switch them to free. This way their handles and curvature won't change if I remove the previous keys. Then press Shift D to duplicate those frames and move them on frame 32. This way the first and last keys of the cycle are the same and we can remove any keys after frame 32 and before frame 0. And we now have both our legs polished and we can jump into the next video where we will be polishing the torso.